So what the webinar is all about is the Onyx dataset itself. And what we're going to be doing today is talking about the dataset a little bit, talking about how to clean it, how to prep it, and so forth. Then we're going to talk about certain visualizations that could be used for this specific dataset based on the data type. And then we're just going to talk about certain formatting options and other tips and tricks that, arise from the discussion. So there we go. And of course, yeah, the Q&A section, if there are any questions, like I said, paste them. If I'm going to notice them earlier than at the very beginning, I'm going to try to answer them. But if not, then there's going to be a separate time at the end where I try to go through all those questions and answer them. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the show. Yeah, I'll call it a show because in a sense, it is. So we're going to go through it, talk about it, and see how things go from there. So first things first, before we jump into the data set itself, let me just quickly share the screen. There we go. Yay, the endless loop. We love it. Let me just quickly move a couple of windows around so everything's all good. There we go. Hide this, copy this, paste it in the chat so everybody has it. So yeah, for those of you who haven't yet, so there are two parts to this challenge. There's the official Onyx data part, and there's the ZoomCharts mini challenge, which is part of the overall challenge, but it's a mini challenge. So if you also want to participate in our mini challenge, for which the grand prize is Amazon gift card for $300, I think. Yeah. So make sure you sign up for that as well. Now, what do you get from participating in our mini challenges? You get access to the developer's license. The developer's license is going to be something that we issue and basically create a new Microsoft account, which has access to all of our visuals. You're going to have all the features and everything, so you're completely free and, without any obligations, allowed to use the visuals, make sure that you can achieve the best possible report that's out there, right? And might as well, play around with interesting things, see what's new there. So that's definitely good there. You can, of course, submit the report right here as well. And if for any reason you forget your access, you can see your license right here as well. The one thing, though, remember about the developer's licenses is that once you sign in with your new account and the password that we provide, you can see right here, there's going to be a first initial prompt that you need to change the password. So just make sure that you note somewhere down the password, because that password is not something that we can display here afterwards for security reasons, right? We don't need passwords to be visible by admins or anything. It's for encryption reasons. So make sure you note down your passwords. But of course, if you forget about the password, well, things happen, right? You forget the password or anything, make sure to reach out to our team. Just type in an email to webinars@zoomcharts.com, and I'm pretty sure Sabina is going to help me with the email, so you just know exactly how it looks and how to write it. But yeah, if you have any questions, any concerns, anything just, happens in between, you just want to have some help or anything, let us know. We'll try to accommodate all of those cases. That's one thing. The other thing is, when participating in the ZoomCharts mini challenge, one of the things that we do is we provide you feedback on your report. So if you qualify for all the initial requirements, so you have at least 2 ZoomCharts visuals in a single page, you have created the report itself on the basic structure and everything, once you submit it, we go through it and we provide some personalized feedback. So on the things that we think could be improved upon, something to take note of. So one of the things that they usually also recommend is don't try to wait till the very last day, right? If there's something that you're not quite, let's say, fully satisfied with when creating the report, I would say it's much better to submit a version which you feel okay with and get some additional feedback and then see what else I can do on top of it. Maybe the feedback that we give you is the answer or the trigger that you needed to add something or change something that you were kind of struggling with. So do that, get the feedback, and keep on going. Now, the most important thing about this page itself is right here. If you scroll down, you can see you can also get the data set, which is the most important thing, right? Without it, kind of hard to create a report. So get the data set. If you click on it, you're going to download a zip file. The zip file is going to contain 2 things. I already have it downloaded. Whilst it's downloading in the background, I'm just going to open it up. So within it, you're going to have 2 things. This one, disregard, this is just a hidden file. But there are 2 things in it. There's the dataset itself, the Excel file, and then there's going to be also this PDF. This PDF is basically a visual cheat sheet, meaning that it allows you to understand what visuals from the native stack could be replaced with one of ZoomCharts visuals. This is just to help you understand what type of visuals are supported and what can be replaced with what, right? It's just to make sure that you have the best possible information that's out there. Other than that, of course, don't forget you have the academy, you have sample reports. Don't be afraid to go through previous challenges. So for example, if you open up challenges, right here at the bottom, I don't know, for example, Onyx Date of February challenge, open that up and just look at the winning report, for example, one of the examples. And if you scroll down lower, you can see all the submissions. So just take a look at what people have been creating, how different visuals can be utilized and so forth. Take that as a source of inspiration, right? Don't necessarily take one report as a template and just change the data and use the same template. Don't do that. And you're not really gaining anything from it, right? The main idea about these challenges is that you're challenging yourself and you're learning from this experience. So take it as a source of inspiration. See something cool, but oh yeah, I want to implement that. So try to figure out how to do it. And of course, if you want to ask something from a particular developer who, for example, let's say Pramathesh won the February challenge. If you open up the report itself or the submission actually, click too many times, happens. You can see as well here, this is one of the reasons why we ask for your LinkedIn. It's a great way on how to get some exposure. So you can see Pramethesh's LinkedIn account, and you can just message him and say, hey, I noticed that you did this on your report. Could you please tell me how did you do it, or at least guide me in the general direction where I need to look, right? The whole idea about the community and all these challenges is this is an environment where you guys can learn to be able to create better and better results. At the end, you're going to be able to create these so-called pro reports, right? Which allow you not only to look at the results, but also look beyond those results and see, for example, okay, why did this happen? So that's the general idea here. All right, without further ado, I think we're ready to jump into the data set. So I'm gonna open up the Excel file for the original data set. Let's go right here. We're gonna see there's quite a bit of columns, right? This time we don't have definition for these columns, so I don't necessarily know as well what every. Okay, Rebecca has no sound. Can anybody else confirm if you guys can hear me, or did I cut out on my side? Just wanted to double check. If this sounds okay for everybody else, I would just recommend to rejoin Rebecca. Technical stuff can always cause some issues with the sound or something. Or, as me, always check if you have actually unmuted the speakers. Okay, so we have confirmation that other people can hear me. So just try rejoining Rebecca and also check if you have enabled the speakers to actually pass out a volume. Trust me, I've made this mistake multiple times. It happens to the best of us. All right, so within the data set, you're gonna notice there's a couple of things. The first thing actually that I noticed here is once I started to look at it, I'm like seller, private, it seems like it's missing a letter, but okay, things happen. Then I'm looking at offer type Angebot. That doesn't seem English. And I look at the other options through the filtering, and I see there's Gesuch. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be English. Look at some other. Okay, what else? Gearbox, we can see. Okay, yeah, that's definitely also not English. Some other parts. And this is the part that gave it away, at least for me, right? There's a column which basically states whether the car was repaired previously or not. So if I see ja and nein, for me, it's a trigger to, okay, this is probably German. I could be wrong, but I think this is going to be German. So one of the things that I would recommend you to do, and this is also what I did on my side, is try to translate certain things from the data set just so you can understand it better. You can, of course, keep the original German version of it. There's not going to be any issues with that. But I think it's just going to be a lot easier for you guys as well to navigate the report if you understand what's within it, right? And you can do this in multiple ways. You can do this on the original Excel, just translate it here. You can use, for example, if you don't know how to find the translations, one of the ways on how you can do it is like this. Click on a value, then go to Review tab up here, Translate, and it's going to try to auto-detect it first. You can see it detected it's German, and you can see an English translation. So you can just take this and replace the original values. That's one of the options. Yeah, see, that's a benefit, Esther. For you, it's okay. For me, it's like I partially understand half of it, but half of it I have no clue what it means. But yeah, make sure you change the data set so it's easy for you to work with. Since I don't know German, I know some words, right? But not to an extent where I can work with data freely. So what I did is instead of changing in the original data set, I actually did it in Power BI. And what I did in Power BI is on the Power Query, you can see there's multiple ways on how you can do this as well. I'm just going to close the Excel because otherwise you can see I'm getting these errors. I'm getting these errors because I'm connected to an Excel file, which is live syncing with OneDrive. And if you have a file that is syncing with OneDrive, you cannot have it open and work with it on a Power Query. You're going to get these errors. So just close down because I didn't change anything in the original data set. There we go. Come on, my friend. There we go. I'm just going to do this so I don't see those errors because they kind of annoy me, but it might just be me. And you can see on the Power Query steps, what I did is I just replaced a lot of the values. So for example, if we go for here, we can see that what I changed first is the column seller. So under seller, we have two. We had the one value which states that this is a private listing, and the other one that stated that this is a commercial listing. So we can see private, I just already replaced. I could say it, but I'm most probably going to butcher it. So this one means commercial. I'm not going to try to do that. But yeah, I think that one was commercial. So just change these things so you are okay with working with the data set. The same with the offer type. I'm pretty sure that Angebot meant that this is a request. Oh no, an offer, meaning that you're selling something. And the other option here was an offer, meaning that, sorry, not an offer, but a request when they're looking for something. Gesuch, maybe I pronounced it correctly, maybe not. So that means that you're looking for something. And I think you're going to agree with me, right? If you first take a look at it and play around it, I'm going to be like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing, what I'm analyzing, and what the data really corresponds to. So I just did some basic translations. I didn't go on to translating every single thing because that is not necessary, but I translated the main things so that I can just understand, okay, what is what. You can do this by replacing values. You can also use Google API to do this more dynamically, but that is a more complex solution. Or you can also do something like this. And for example, instead of replacing individual values, you just create a conditional column. So for example, we have an original column named gearbox. And you can see within it, we have three values, basically. We have manual, automatic, and null. So there's not specified. So what I just did is took the original column, created a new column with the extension English, so I know what it is. And then I added the translations. So manual, automatic, not specified. So play around it, make sure it's simple enough for you guys to work with it. The other thing is you're gonna know this. For example, I didn't know what this, for example, means. So I didn't include it in my testing. A/B test and control. I don't know the results. I don't know how to interpret them. So I'm not gonna visualize them or use them within the reporting system. I could add it as a filter, meaning that the user would still be able to use them. But since I don't know the context behind them, I don't know what visual, for example, should I be using this for this specifically better. So for that reason, since I also don't have anybody to ask about the original data set, I'm going to leave them out for now. And this is usually how I go through things, right? I try to understand what I can use, what I cannot use, what I can interpret, what type of visuals do I use, and so forth. Now, something else we have here is when you go through the columns, you're going to see there's different columns regarding the date. So there's date crawled. I'm guessing that this is the time when it was scraped from the original data source. At the very end of the table, we have last seen. It might be the last time the listing was seen or something. Don't know how to interpret that. But we do have a date created. Okay, so that's something I could work with. And we also do have two columns, which are month of registration. And we also have year of registration. So I'm just going to move them a little bit closer to each other. Let's see if I didn't break anything. Okay, didn't break anything. Good. So year of registration and month of registration. So what I did with these is, because that's something that I could actually visualize, right? I, for example, could create a chart that showcases the amount of listings based on when the vehicle was registered. But in order to do that, yeah, of course, Rebecca. Like I said, the session is going to be recorded already, and you're going to have a recording afterwards accessible for you. So you can watch it whenever you have the time or the conditions are a little bit better. So yeah, that's initial glance at the report, not the report, but the data set itself. And like I said, for example, the year of registration and the month of registration is something that you could use. I'm just going to discard these changes because I didn't really do anything. And what I did with it is I created a date, a new registration date, which basically uses the date function. And for the date function, you need to reference year. So I'm referencing the year of registration. For the month variable, I'm using the month of registration. And for the day, because date needs three components, year, month, day. Since I don't know what day it was when the vehicle was registered, I'm just basically using one, meaning that it's always going to be the first of month. Because I did this in the timeline visual as well, one of the things that I did is in the hierarchy, it's in Latvian, unfortunately, I didn't change it yet. But you can see, so this is year, quarter, month, and I removed the date component. In the original hierarchy, it's right here. We have it, but since we don't really have any actual data for the date of registration, I removed the date component completely. So the user doesn't get confused, why are all the registrations on the first of each month, right? It doesn't make any sense. So that is one of the things that I did here. What else? In order to define the number of listings or ads, or call them however you want to, I just created a very simple measure of just counting all the rows. You could also use count rows measure. What I did is on Power Query, I inserted the index column, and you can do this the following way. So if you open up Power Query, right here, add a column, index, and you can start either from 0, 1, or you can also create a custom one, which isn't necessary in this case, but sometimes it might be something you might be interested in. So I created the index column, and once I created the index column, I created a measure which just calculated the count of index. So it just counted up all the values. And I'm using that as a measure for understanding how many listings do we have in total. That is one thing. The other thing is that I noticed straight away is, for example, I'm just going to go to a new page. And let's say I want to understand what is the date range for the years of registration, right? And if I use the column that I just created from the formula that I showed before, I'm going to quickly remove this filter. There we go. You're going to see that the starting date for the vehicles registered is from 999. Not even 1,000, but 999. And it finishes off at 9,999. Now, I don't know about you guys, but last time I checked, we're living in 2024, meaning that this number is kind of impossible. I mean, these numbers theoretically could be possible, but you can't really register a vehicle in the future. So to control this, what I did is I created another control column where I basically stated that, hey, if the year of registration is smaller or equal to 2024, which is this year that we're on right now, and is on or after 1990, the reason why I did this is just to limit the date range because I didn't want to go to, 999, even without 1,000, like I said. I just want to limit the range that the users are seeing. I could, of course, just keep the regular slicer so he can determine the dates of registration. But the tricky part about this is it's very hard to control this for the main reason that this value is very high. So for example, when I go towards the down, you can see I have to go through every single thousands of years, right? And if I, for example, wanted to filter out just 2024, this is that, and the 1990, something like this, for example. Yeah, for the end user, super intuitive control, right? He could just input the numbers. Yep, one option. But what I did is I created a control column which says that, hey, this is going to be between this and that. You could also use, for example, things like dynamic values, which could be created through the field parameters with numerical ranges. And then you allow the user, for example, to define this yes, no, basically. Multiple ways on how you could do this. What I would do is just, since I created this validation column to limit the range of data that's coming in, I would put a disclaimer somewhere on the report saying that, hey, this report is filtered for vehicles registered starting from and up until. Because in the timeline visual, you can see since we're having such a high value, you can't really, you can try to put it however you want to, but you can't have everything in a single viewport. So the report basically becomes unusable. So I'm using this control column just to have some normality to everything. So that is one of the things that I'm doing here. What else? For additional columns, I think that's about it. For measures, I didn't do anything extra. There's a lot of things that you can do, but since it's just a basic cover for the data set so you know what to do with it, I didn't go with anything extra. Now, as far as the visuals go, you can see that I went with 4 different visuals. I went with a map visual, I went with the timeline, with a combo bar, and 2 donut charts. But you could use here also just a regular combo chart. You could be using a waterfall for certain instances to showcase, for example, how the total number of vehicles is split by, let's say, the gear type or fuel type. How does it individually stack up and how much is it in the total? There are different ways on how you could play around with these. For the map visual, one of the things that I noticed is on the regional data set, the only thing that allows us to kind of go with the geographical information is going to be the latitude and longitude and also the postal code. Now, I don't live in Germany, and even if I would, we do have postal codes also in Latvia, but I don't know them by head, right? So it's not going to really help me in any way, shape, or form. So what I wanted to do is provide a way for the end users to just use the map a little bit more intuitively. Because I could just create a regular map, right? We can do it right here. So for example, if I create a new instance of the map, let's go for latitude, let's go for longitude, and just number of registered vehicles. There we go. Okay, we can see the map of Germany. We can see there are some outliers from other countries. But for this one, sure, we could change the color of the nodes and everything, but to a certain extent, it's kind of hard to filter out a region, for example. I could use the lasso tool, for example, to create a selection here and use that as a filter. I could use control to individually select it, but it's not very intuitive. So what I did is I went with the GeoJSONs. And if we open up the map visual right here, you're going to see that I have 4 different shape layers enabled. And the shape layers, what I'm using for them is an external GeoJSON, which defines the shapes. And the end result that I achieved here is, for example, if I put it on a focus mode, so it's just a little bit easier for you guys to see, is I started off with the country. If I zoom in a little bit closer, you can see I switched to the second layer. For the second layer, we can also switch the outlines a bit so it's more prominent. There we go. So you can see these are, I think, administrative regions. If I zoom in a little bit closer, they're still here. Zoom in a little bit closer. I split up to the next hierarchy in the regionality. And then the fourth one is, I think it was counties. So I went as deep as I could when it comes to different regionalities. And the way that I did this, or the reason why this is so good, is because if I go to the original report and just zoom in into a particular area, so let's say right here, let's say this is the segment that I want to filter out. I can just simply click on it and it filters everything that's within the boundaries of it. I don't have to create multiple selections. I don't have to create the lasso layers or anything. These shapes are pre-built and I'm using them from the web that I just found. The way you could be looking for it is also quite simple. You can just go in Google and type in Germany GeoJSON. I found a GitHub. And in GitHub, I found this particular submission and I'm going through it and I can see, okay, there's multiple layers. It seems like there's different also quality maps. So the level of detail the map takes in. So I can see there's different high level. Then we have the federal states. There we go. Those are federal states. Then we have the government districts. And after the government districts, we have the counties. So that's the hierarchy that I'm creating for the map. And in order to get the file itself, I'm just going to scroll back up. I'm looking at what they have in the repository. And I have, for example, Deutschland. This means it's the shape of the country itself. These were the administrative regions. Of course, you can translate everything, but I just went with a gut feeling, where the other option is open up the folder. These are different levels of details. Remember, we had that high, medium, and low quality. I went with the low for the main reason that the high quality GeoJSONs are larger file sizes, so that it's going to be loading a lot longer. So I'm checking this one and seeing, okay, so this is this layer. Okay, how do I use it? Quite simple. Click on this raw, so you get the actual content of the file. Copy the URL, go to the map visual, and I'm going to do it on a separate page for the main reason that I want you to see how I do it from scratch. So select this one, open up formatting options, enable the shape layer. By default, it's going to be using shapes for the countries of the world, but I'm going to change the type to GeoJSON. And here in the URL, I'm going to paste in the URL from GitHub. Give it a second to load in. And then, of course, you can play around with the fill colors. Let's say I want it to be purple. For the outlines, I want it to be, for example, red. Just an example, right? And you can see all these borders and radiuses are being covered for it. Now, if I wanted to, for example, showcase also how it works on a data set, I'm taking the same information and even just a regular card, that's going to be enough. So the total numbers of vehicles is 361,000 for listings. If I select a particular region, you can see that filters out everything that is within it. We have a question, and the question is, how do the tooltips work on the map? So on the map visual, one of the main things that we wanted to do is not overcrowd the visual with information, meaning that the tooltip is actually hidden under right click. Within the tooltip, you have your longitude and latitude because currently that is the only information it has. But if you want to have anything extra in the tooltip, just add it right here in the tooltip field. So I could go for total number of vehicles. You can see it's not refreshing, so I need to just open it up again. And the good thing about this is that you can also see that this tooltip is actually a multi-page tooltip, so you can actually go through each individual point. But yeah, I would add these shape layers just for the ease of use for the end user, so you can play around with the map and filter information in different ways. One other thing that I would probably play around with would be create an additional dimension for the geography, and also not just have the postal codes, but create a full data set of federal states that we had for the government states, for the counties. So, you have the full hierarchy and allow the user to filter out, from, for example, from slicers, not just the map itself. So we can quickly focus on a particular area, on a particular city or something. So that is one of the things. As far as the tooltips goes, the other thing that you can also do is node settings. And actually, no, leave it there, but you can enable, where was it? Tooltip settings, change it to Power BI tooltip. And this one is going to show up on a hover. So there are different things and different instances on how things are getting called out. What we did with our tooltip is we didn't want to create a situation where you accidentally hover over things and you're always just getting a tooltip regarding the shape, regarding the node, or something like that. If you want to get the tooltip, you right click and you specifically call it out. That's one thing that we did here for the map visual. All right, what else? Yeah, if there are any questions regarding the map visual or the setup or anything like that, like I said, do let me know. I'm going to try to answer all of them. That's not an issue whatsoever. So the second visual we had here is a timeline visual. So for the timeline visual, the setup that I did is the following. I created the timeline based on the date of registration. Not the date of when the listing was created or something, but when the vehicle was registered. So I wanted to understand and see the listings for particular years of registration. So I'm using the registration date in the hierarchy. Like I said, I don't need the last layer, which is going to be the days, because we have all the listings on a single day. I add the date again. This connects the date to the hierarchy. And for the value, I'm using the total count of listings. There you go. Step one. Step two is I could just leave it like this. So just look at the total numbers. But what I did to enhance it is I actually added also the gearbox English column, which was the column I created with conditional formatting, which basically gives me either this is manual or automatic transmission, or if it's not specified, for example. And in this case, you can see we have automatic, manual, and not specified. Okay? By default, the chart, once you add a legend field, creates a clustered column chart. Yeah, not bad, but to save some space, because this is hard to read, right? There's a lot of columns, and especially if you go down in the hierarchy, so for example, quarters, yeah, this is not very intuitive. So what I did instead is I went into the formatting options and I found a tab called Series Default. And instead of clustering, I changed it to be stacked column chart. We could also add, of course, the value labels, but the one tricky thing about value labels is you need to understand whether or not they're going to be useful and efficient. So for example, on initial glance with this chart, even if I add the value labels, well, the labels are relatively small. Now the chart is big, right? It's covering almost all the page. But in reality, the chart was maybe something like this, right? So there are no labels. But the good thing about on how we did the labels with our visuals is for example, if I zoom in into fewer years, you can see now, okay, these numbers are visible and there's enough room to display them. Zoom into particular 5 months, for example, so you can see them. So always just think about what is going to be the initial entry point. Do you need the labels? Do you not need them? Do you want the user to see them afterwards? Just play around with those and kind of see what fits better. The one thing that I cannot emphasize enough as well is whenever you are learning to create Power BI reports, don't be afraid to showcase them to your friends, family, other, like-minded people to just give you some constructive criticism. Trust me, the mistakes that they're going to notice is something that you most likely missed because you were too focused on other things. The amount of times when I even have created reports, which I think, now this is, I've done everything. There's nothing missing here. And then you give it to somebody else, he's playing around with it like, what does it do it like this? And he shows me, for example, a specific action sequence. And I'm like, Yeah, that doesn't make sense, but I can fix it. So learn from those mistakes and make the reports even better. Don't be afraid to fail. Failing is just a word, right? It's also a lesson that you can learn from there, always. So for the timeline, like I said, I went with the approach of the gearbox or the transmission, you could call it like that. And on the secondary y-axis, I actually added the average price. So I wanted to see how in different years the average price point has differed. Because you can see, for example, the highest value car we have as a listing is 2.1 it's on basically 2.15 million. There is a car. Let's check what it is. Let's just put it above 1 million. There's only one listing here. I'm actually going to use a drill through to the details page. And we can see it's a vehicle registered in 1996, and it's in Sonstig Autos. No idea what it is, but I would probably afterwards Google it and try to understand why is this vehicle 2.15 million. It's probably a relic or classic, most likely, right? But hey, it raises a lot of eyebrows when you first see the price point of 2.17 million. Sorry, 15 million. So just think about different scenarios that you could utilize here and look at. All right, what else? So that was for the timeline. To add a way for the user to control the whole data set, I also added a combo chart, combo bar. And in this case, what I did is I went with the same color coding as for this one. The main reason is so it's just easier for user to understand that yellow means manual, automatic is in orange, and not specified is in red. So for example, if I say that, hey, I want to focus on manual vehicles, you can see that this chart as well becomes yellow. For this one, for the map, you can see it's orange. And if we remove the filter, there's actually two instances of orange available, meaning that I just need to adjust my colors. Find the category colors. So manual is going to be yellow, automatic is going to be orange, not specified is going to be red. And you do this just to make sure that the same color means the same thing across all of your visuals. There we go. We can see that my report is struggling a bit. Well, that's also one of the realities that sometimes things are not working as fast as you would want to. Automatic. I'm missing this one. It's loading. And it should change soon. But yeah, use the same color coding, so it's just easier for the end user to understand, okay, what color represents what and how can I read this information. So that goes with that. What else? The donut charts. For the donut charts, I went with just a very basic setup of going into different dimensions. So for example, here we're focusing on the brand and the model. So for example, this is the analysis that I wanted to do, right? For an example, I want to buy a BMW. I want to buy an E3 series. Okay, that is the market that I currently have available. There's 20,000 listings. Okay, I also want an automatic transmission, and I want a car which is registered within the span of 2015 2018. So that gives me all the listings. There's 162 listings. I could filter it out even further, and I could say that, hey, well, I'm not willing to pay more than 10K. Use the price range filter. There's 130 listings. Well, still quite a lot. What else? We could look at, this one has what? Vehicle type and fuel type. Okay, not going to touch that. Going to look at all the 130 listings. And I'm going to use the drill through. So that's 130 listings of different BMW 3rd series. And I could add additional filters on the drill through page as well. Because remember, the report instance is about not just showcasing the results, but it's also creating a story that you're telling. And in this case, what I'm basically doing with the report is I'm using the first page as an overview page. That is basically my filtering page. It allows me to apply high-level filters to understand how many instances of listings and everything I have. And when I want to focus on a specific entry, I would just go to a drill-through page and probably add some additional filters here. So for example, we see that there wasn't anything related to the mileage, right, on the original page. So I'm just going to add, for example, a slicer right here, or not even maybe a slicer, but let's say I wanted to add a column chart. You can do that as well. I'm going to say the kilometer is going to be the category, and the number of listings is going to be the value. We're going to take a look at it, for example, and do something like this. But at the same time, we'll look at it and there's very high difference in these ones, right? And these names, they take a lot of space. So much rather, I would probably do something like this and just leave it a regular slicer. It takes a lot less space. Because the main idea about the visuals and the way you put them together is they need to support each other, not create a more difficult storytelling. So I'm going to say that I want to have a vehicle which has no more than, okay, let's say 20,000 miles. Is there even a listing? Okay, there's actually 3 listings like that. Well, I'm looking at the prices. I have a budget of 500. I could also, for example, add a price slicer. I could add a donut chart or something, but in this case, I just want to slice and dice basically. I'm going to say I have a budget of 500 euros. So these are my 2 options. If it would be let's say a scraped data set with also a link to the listing, there would probably be a URL here which I could use then to go to the listing and contact the owner. That's the way I would use the report, right? It's all about creating a story with your report. And the visuals and the way you lay them, the way that you add the data to them is there to support that, not to make things more difficult, right? Because in the end of the day, you want to make reports. Well, I usually refer to them as pro reports. Those are basically reports which allow you not to only see the results, but you can actually try to understand why. In this case, the result is the market of the listings that we have available. And the why is actually what. So what is the listings what are the listings that are underneath it? So what makes the market? So these questions can change, but the main idea is to understand the result and how do we come to this result. That's what it's all about in reporting. Yeah, quick off topic. Whenever you guys have the time, it can also be at the very end of the webinar. And those of you who have been here, you've heard me saying this before. I'm not afraid to beg, but I do beg. Please leave your feedback about the session itself. It just helps us to understand whether this was interesting, whether it was, you felt this was a waste of time, whether there were certain topics that we didn't discuss, something you want us to discuss, something or a particular visual you want us to discuss. Just tell us how you feel about these sessions. You like them, you don't like them, what do you think is missing? It just helps us to understand and also focus and create better content that you are actually guys looking for rather than just creating just another session because we have to, right? That's not the end goal for all of this. Okay, yeah, for the donut, the last thing that I did here, of course there are slicers and things like that here, but for the donut chart, the last thing that I did is I added a base fill color. The reason why I added a base fill color is because I'm essentially talking about the same metric, so I'm talking about the number of listings. Here we have color coding for things because there's a certain meaning behind it. But when it comes to different dimensions, which cannot really be split by the same dimension, so for example, I can't really split a donut chart one slice by 3 different segments, right? It just would look weird. And most likely I would say just use a sunburst chart for that. But it's not a great use because there's a lot of categories. So not to confuse people, what I do is instead of just allowing the Power BI to figure out a color based on the unique combinations, because you can see this is just a wheel of colors, right? Some are going to be more visually appealing, some are going to be less visually appealing, but there's going to be a lot of different colors. So what we can do is use a base fill color. And I want to say that, hey, I want the donut chart to use this as the base, and everything else is going to be a lighter version of the same color. It just allows you to create, again, a unanimous experience across the report. and not have 30 different colors and people just trying to understand, okay, if this is orange and this is orange, does that mean that they are related in any way, right? You want to eliminate any unnecessary questions. But yeah, that goes for that. The drill through page, the setup is pretty simple. For my page, the setup is even simpler because there's nothing visually styled here. I just put it together. I have a table with different columns. I added these two slicers right here during the session. And in order to create a drill through page, the most important thing is don't forget to add the drill through fields here. So for example, if I create a new page, you can see there's a field right here at the bottom saying add drill through fields here. So here you need to add every single column that you have within your visuals on the original page from which you want to go to the drill through page. It might sound confusing, but it's really not. It's just the first 1 or 2 times when you create these pages, things get a little bit tricky, but afterwards, it's not that bad. So just basically add here every column from which you want your end user to be able to come to the drill through page. So for example, on my side, I had brand, fuel type, gearbox, gearbox, model, offer type, vehicle type. Yeah, that's it. So for example, if I create a new visual here, let's say just a regular donut chart with the same gearbox and number of vehicles, even from this page, I can right click on the visual and do a drill through. So all the columns that are in the drill through fields here section are used to get to that drill through page. That's one thing. The other thing is do not mix which page needs these fields. These drill through fields need to be set up on a page not from which you want to get there, but to the one you want to go to. So in this case, since I want to go to the table, I set it up for the page which has the table, not the other way around and set it up here, example here, and say this is the one from which I want to go there. That's one thing. What else? When creating drill through pages, for example, don't forget to think about this button right here, keep all filters. So what it does is when you hover over it, it's basically going to tell you what it does. But in other words, if this is enabled, it means that Power BI is capturing every single filter that is active on this page. If it's disabled, it will only capture filters for these specified fields that you had provided in the drill through section. For example, the price, you can see here, I'm just going to remove these, right? Because this is what I had basically initially. I have my X amount of listings. I'm going to remove also all the BMWs. So there's not a single filter applied right now. See? All listings are here. If I remove this and go back to the first page and say I only want to see the listings for Volkswagen, you can see that is the only thing that it took. If I have this enabled, and I'm going to say the following. So I want to have the listings for Volkswagen. I want to have listings only for manual transmission. So these are the fields that I have within the drill through. But for example, price was something I didn't have. And I'm going to say the price is going to be 10K. No more than 10K. We have 55K listings, still a lot. Is there a particular area code? Yep, let's go with this one. And then from, let's say the same, I want a Volkswagen Passat. Go here, and you can see this one's coming from the visual, this coming from the visual, and these ones which are in italic, so they have a little bit of angle to them. These are the additional filters that Power BI recognized. So these are not coming from the visual that I came here. but these are additional filters. So it captured all of them, and it applies also all of them. So it's just something to keep in mind. Um, we have a question from Rashmi. Let me just broadcast it so you guys see it as well. So in the data set, month of registration, I can see 0 value. How to handle this? Most likely, 0 just means it's January. So instead of, I would say like this, right? Let me just double check as well, just not to talk complete nonsense. So we have 0 going up until 12. Okay. So for 0, I would probably then 1, 2, 3, have every single number. Yeah. Okay, that's a brain picker. Let's see, what years have 0? Now I'm just curious. Okay, almost every single year has them. Okay, so if you have a scenario like that, since you don't have the original data source owner to ask, okay, what does it mean 0, right? The most likely way of how I would handle it is I would create a switch for 2 dates. One date which eliminates all those rows which have a month of 0, and the other one where I would add and change 0 to 1 with a disclaimer to the end user that January has also listings with where the date has been entered as 0. So the user has an option to exclude them or include them, but you have to figure out where to include them, right? So I would probably go with January, but just put a disclaimer for the end user because otherwise there's going to be a lot of confusion as always. You want to make sure that the end user understands what's happening and what am I seeing right now. As far as the reports go itself, the way I would say think about them is reports usually have different levels, right? You want to start off with the basic level, which is like the basic tier of reports. And within that, you have to make sure that your data is cleaned. You have done your transformations, it's readable, it's understandable, you don't have any error messages and so forth. And there's some sort of architecture behind it. The architecture behind it, meaning that this is not just a flat Excel file, right? You can, of course, work with flat Excel files, but the bigger the report is going to become, the more consequences you're going to feel. The slower it's going to get for the one reason that there's going to be more rows and columns that it has to simultaneously go through to give you the result. If you create a data model, this is one of the things that you're overcoming. You're allowing Power BI to split the information and only check for the needed one rather than going through the whole table. Where you can learn about data modeling, I've shown this before, but go ahead and sqlbi.com training, and right here, introduction into data modeling. It's a great course for introductionary skills, for the very basics. And I would say this is a mandatory skill for anybody working or planning to work with Power BI, just so you know the core things about it. Once you have created that core of the report, which is the basic report, you go to the next stage, which let's say is called the advanced stage. And within the advanced stage, that's where you start to create your visualizations. So you have the data has been cleaned, it's transformed, you're ready to go with it, but it needs to tell some sort of a story, right? You're creating a report which gives you the results, not yet answers the questions why or what. So those are basic visuals, cards, not a lot of drill downs or things like that. So that's a basic report, or not a basic, but kind of a transition from basic to advanced. Once you already created that advanced report, the last thing you have to pretty much do is make sure that the report not only is easy to use and intuitive to use and has clean data and all of that, but it also answers the questions of what or why is happening, right? How did we get here? What's happening? What are these results? Why did these results come to us? What did we do differently last year from this year? Like a lot of different questions get answered. And it's one of those things that you gonna notice when you start to go into the reporting business, is that the result is just the tip of the iceberg. Everybody asks you for results, right? But it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to provide it straight away. Or even if you are, that doesn't mean that you know why it happened. You're just representing results. You're showcasing the end result, not what caused the result or what led us to the result. So just keep all of that information in your head whilst making these reports and think about, how can I create a story from this? How can I present it? And how can I make a report which allows the user to basically explore the story? Because having a report with just random visuals, random KPI cards and everything, it's not difficult. Everybody can do that. The tricky part is creating a report which is interesting for the end user, and then they're feeling relatively at home on how to navigate it and find the information. Like I said, in this case, I would basically use this as an overview just to see, for example, what's the average price of a car. For my specific filters, how many listings we have, how many brands I have to choose from, there's a price range, there's a postal code area, and I'm using the visuals to just filter out the information. And then I'm going through the through page to see the details, to see the actual listings that made up the results that I searched for. So yeah, that's the way I would do it. But other than that, I would say thank you so much for your time. I hope this session was interesting and you managed to learn something new and useful. Keyword being useful, remember, learning something new is not difficult. Learning something new and useful is a little bit more complex. But yeah, from my side and our team, I say thank you once more and good luck in the challenge. And I'll see you in the winner announcement webinar. All right. Bye, everyone.